Okay, so let's get started. It's going to be a short video. So I've created this texture. It's really quick, and this is going to be for a battery charger. So we're going to create a 2D graphic, simple asset. So just create this simple bubble texture that we can use and repeat as a texture in Ventuz. If you don't have Photoshop, you could create this in Gimp, which is open source, similar to Photoshop. But I didn't want to spend too much time doing this. Photoshop something crappy like that, but it's simple, you know. And anyway, let's get started. So jump into Ventuz. I'm going to need an axis. That was the only thing you really need to go outside Photoshop for, outside Ventuz for, just to do that little texture. So I'm just going to close that down. We don't need to see my log stuff. Anyway, scale this rounded rectangle up. Color, solid color. Sorry, and texture, base with alpha. Now you're going to load that PNG that you create. Liquid. So I'll call this liquid 1, and you can see here's the texture. Doesn't look brilliant right now. Hopefully we'll improve on that. So change your UV mapping on your texture that you loaded. I'm going to change this to UV 0. So now if I scale it on the Y, I want it to fill the bar up like so. But I also want it to have this liquid movement, so it's moving across, and to repeat that. So what we're going to do is turn the clamp off. So it turns to clamp off to simple wrap because we want it wrap. But we notice that the Y wraps, and we don't want the wrap on the vertical, we just want it to wrap horizontally. So what you go is where it says type here, and you choose wrap on the U but clamp the V. Right? So now when you change the Y, it still scales up, and when you change the X position, it animates across, and that's what we want. Perfect. So let's start. Let's fill this up to the top for now, and let's just adjust this to make it look more like a battery. So let's scale this up on the Y, something like that will do. That'll do nicely. Okay, so what we want to do is change so we can animate the Y position, and we can animate the X. So to animate the X, we're going to animate the X with a mover. So you go to your animation tab, grab a mover, drop it into your content window, take the X position, drop it on the mover, uncheck swing. I want it to go the other direction, so I want it 1 to -1, and I want to slow this down, so maybe 3 seconds, maybe 5 seconds. And you can just play around with that. There we go, that'll do for now. Okay, and then if you click on our texture here, you'll see then now it goes up. Now to get this looking a bit more interesting, right now it looks a bit weird, and you can see I've got this weird jagged here. I could go back and fix my Photoshop, but just to help you understand, you can go back and fix this. This is just a texture fix, but anyway, we will just create the asset. We'll carry on. We'll look through it. Anyway, let's add some color to this. So texture, and let's choose diffuse. So now the diffuse, we want to apply a gradient. So I'm going to go for the black and white gradient. It's the easiest one to edit because it's just 2 colors, and we want to change the colors. So I'm going to go for purple at the bottom, and then here for like a pink. Cool. We can move this across slightly. There we go. So now when you animate the Y, so if you click on the texture loader here, if you animate that Y position, let's see, it gets lighter as we get to the top. There we go. Which is cool, right? Let's make it a little more interesting. So what we're going to do is control and drag this above, so we duplicate this, and we just call this back. It's the back So this is going to be behind. What I'm going to do is just change that gradient so it's darker than the other one. So I'm just going to go for a darker, slightly darker value here, and then on the lighter value as well, bring this down. For a darker value, there we go. Now what we're going to do is offset that mover. So we're going to offset it, something like this, and we want it moving the opposite direction. So right now we've got 1 and 1, so we want it to go -1 to 1. There we go. Now we've got some kind of liquid going on. Now the issue we have is, like, they both have separate positions on the Y. I mean, you can shift select them both right now, because I've got them selected both here. But we want just them to be driven by one value. So as it fills up, only one value fills it up. Alright, so really easy. You can do is go into your logic tab, get a variable, get an integer or float. We'll stick with integers, run around it up, say 0 to 100 for example, and we're going to use a clipping node as well. So we need a clipping node, if I can remember where the clipping nodes are. Clipping node is under math effects, clipping. There we go. So we can take a look at our values of the Y position. So here, so the texture doesn't exist. I mean, it's up to you how low you want to go at the bottom. But right now, this is our minimum value. For me, it would be -0.3. So my minimum output will be this. This is my minimum output. And then my maximum would be when it's full up. So when it reaches the top. Which will be, let's just say 1. Let's say 1 for now. Well, actually it's not 1 really, it's 0.83. So if we said here, our maximum is 0.83. That'll fill the whole bar. Okay. So what we want to do is have this. So when we drag this from 0 to 100, actually we just, to make it even more, to visually make it easier, for you to see, we can just use a simple control. So under animation, simple control, because this is a slider going 0 to 100, and we can say, well, our input is this progress, which is this 0 to 100, and you can see 100 right now because this is set to 100. So we need to set our maximum in, so this is coming in, so it's to 100, and so it's converting these values to these values. And what we want to do is take our Y position and drop it on our clipping node. So now, as we drag the progress, you can see, fills the bar. So you could animate this if you wanted, or you can have a value as an integer. So this could be an integer, or it could be float. Depends. I just did the progress bar so you can see it actually as a percentage. You can see here, it's easier to understand and see what we're doing. And this is just converting those values to the clipping node. Okay, but we're just creating a fancy graphic, so we're not really spending too much time on functionality. Just making a nice little graphic. So let's just put this to 100% so it's filled the whole entire thing. Okay. So what we're going to do is get another axis. We want another rounded rectangle. And we're just going to scale this. Now I should bring this forward in Z. I'm going to bring it by 2. And then scale the Y. Make it really rounded, something like this. I'm gonna create a group. Let's get a group just to keep it named, you know. I'm gonna start naming these, so put these two in a group. Call that front, and you can call this like liquid, you know. And then this is, I'm gonna call this highlights. Okay. So I'm gonna position this something like here. Just over here, and I'll scale this down. So it's not, it doesn't need to be huge. You can play around with it. It's just aesthetics now, so it's not nothing fancy. I'm gonna make another one over here on the top right. This one would be a lot thinner, maybe. There we go. Cool. And what we can do is apply a solid color to the front of both. So now we can change the opacity on that. There we go. So it gives you kind of, we want it to look like it's in a glass, even though this is, even if it's not full, and it gives us this illusion that there's some kind of reflection, fake, it's just a graphic. So let's make the little outline. Let's make an outline for this. Now, again, you could use a texture. If it was, I would use a texture, but I don't want to go, I want to try to do everything in here, but you can go into Photoshop and create that texture. Let's create a rounded rectangle, so increase that roundness. You can put a hole in it. However, when you go filled, it doesn't fill it the same way. So we might have to create a mask instead to get that hole. So I'll just duplicate this. So we have two. Render options, stencil, test, and one is set. Okay. Test and set. Then layer 1. Now make one smaller than the other, and then let's just switch those around so the set's above the test. Right. Now we have a nice outline. Now I can scale this. There we go. And if I adjust the size just to get that, or the even, nice and even. There we go. Now I have a nice outline. Now what I can do is just parent these together like this, and then I can scale them all with that one axis. Now what I do want to do is make sure, yeah, that I have the top and the bottom even. So, you know, I might want to scale that a little bit, and then maybe scale this one in till I'm happy with it. There we go. And now you can apply, you know, a solid color, just place it in front. That way you can change that color later on. Just give it a little grey. There we go. Looking good. And we're almost done. So what we're going to do is have another axis for the whole group. This will be the whole battery. There we go. So now you can move this around, you know, just position it where you want. Just, you know, rotate it, whatever you want. Anyway. So let's just add a little top to the battery. Really simple. We can take one of these rounded rectangles, just control drag them down, drag it out. There we go. Move it to the top, scale it, change the Y. Okay. And then with this, we want, say you don't want bottom, so the bottom we want it sharp, so bottom right and bottom left. Oh, make sure I got the ones right. So bottom left and bottom right. There we go. And then I can increase that roundness. Scale this up so we can see it better. There you go. And you can position this how you want. I'm going to borrow the same material, so this solid color here, so just the same gray, and I'll scale this down. There we go. And perhaps I'll scale the Y a bit more, the X a bit more. Really up to you how you want it to look, but there you go. Simple. We made a simple battery. Now, to control that battery, let's just make a simple slider. So I mean, with this is just the graphic. So save as. I'll save this as battery 1. There we go. Just overwrite an existing version that I did a test. Right. So we want to control this. Yeah. We want this. Say you have some data or you want to use it to interact with that you know, they can control this nice graphic you've created. So let's do that. This is just a bonus part. Okay. So what we can actually do is we've got this whole battery kind of, let's put in a group, make our life easier. So put everything in a group, merge to container, name that battery, save. So now you still have the access here. I just put everything else in a group, and what I want to do is expose that progress out. If you want, you can expose the colors or whatever you want out as well. For now, I'll just expose this because this is the only thing we want to connect to a slider. So really quickly, grab an axis. We need a rounded rectangle. Okay, we're going to scale that along the X. Something like this. And we're going to duplicate this. We're going to change the X so we have a nice button. So I'll just reset those properties. So we now have that. Scale it up on the scaler. This will be our slider. And this is what we're going to slide along. So really simple. Interaction node, touch translation, place it on that rectangle. So this will be the button or the slider. So this is the actual slider. This is just a graphic. So this is the actual one that we're interacting with. So right now you notice I can move it all over the place and we don't want that. So we want to limit what it can move. Where it says limits, activate that. Now you notice it can only go one by one in all 4 directions, and we don't want it to go in the Y. We just want it to travel along the X. So set these to 0. Increase the X. So if I increase that minimum X value, I'll get about minus 15. So I'll just drag in, so let's say minus 15.5. There we go, minus 15.5, and then the opposite would be 15.5 for me. So this value depends on how big how far you're scaling this. Okay, so we know we want to convert. So what we want to do, actually just put this into a group. Keep it nice and tidy. Call this slider. Okay, so what we want to do is have a clipper that will convert minus 15 to 0 to 100 to control this. Let's merge this down, merge this container down. So it's called slider, and I'm going to get a clipping node and I'll place it inside this slider container just to make it a lot cleaner. So when we connect, you'll see how clean it will be. So our input is coming from the slider, and it's coming from the X value. So right now you can see the input as I drag it. So it'll be minimum is minus 15.5 to 15.5, and our output will be 0 to 100. So now if I click on the clipping node, you'll see here as I drag the slider, we're getting 0 to 100. Now I can expose this output here of that clipping node and call this slider value or something that you could relate to or you understand. Now we have the slider and we have the barrier, so we wouldn't have a clipping node here. Like if I didn't put the clipping node in here, then we would need this clipping node, then connect this. So we can keep it a lot tidier by just doing something like that and having these 2 separate assets kind of ready to link up. And it's cool, so you could use this slider for something else later on, whatever you want. Anyway, all you do is drag the progress to the slider, bam. Right now the slider's at the start, so which is the 0 and 100's here. So before I do anything, I'm just going to add an axis to this slider. So I can move this graphic element now. And move it here. You can just place it wherever you want on the screen. Now as I slide the screen, slider, the battery fills up. Really simple. Let's just take this one step further. So let's just add some value so we can see a value here or value here. Say for example, so you could just add an axis here. Now we can get a text 2D. So if we go to the text tab, 2D text, block text, and just change it to center, choose a font. I'm just gonna edit and choose a font from my project. So I'll go for like something like Plumful. Nice big font. Where is it? P. There we go. There we go. So I have a nice big font we can see. I'm gonna position this here. Okay. So this is, I want a value to be displayed. So I want to show the 0 to 100. Now I can embed this text into the slider. I could there's many ways I can do it. So I could say, okay, I want you to read from this and say display the progress, which will show you the values. But as floats, I could do it this way, link it here as well. So you see, I linked it to the slider, so I have that option that way. And if I don't want the floats, I can say, well, I want an integers only. So I can say you read from the integer, and then this integer could link to this or this. Okay. There we go. And then you have that value scaling up. Now I could embed this text into the slider so it follows this, or I could have it follow the Y. I'll leave that up to you. That's up to you, but you can see how easy it is to create graphics and make them interactive. Really simple. Just started with a simple Photoshop texture. We have an interactive battery. Yeah. Hope that was useful to you. Enjoy your day. I'll make a few more small ones like this, hopefully, throughout the day, and upload them slowly. Thank you again. Be good to each other. Take care.